Hello and welcome back to Two Dark Dozes. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy dark doses of horror that hit you twice as hard, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. We kept knocking on the door for a long time. At first, it was normal knocking, the kind you do when someone is sleeping too deeply, or when someone has locked the door and forgotten that other people are waiting outside. I knocked with my knuckles and called my son's name. My wife stood beside me, asking him to open the door. Her voice was worried, but not yet broken. Not yet afraid in the way it would become later. Then the knocking became harder. I hit the door with my palm, then with my fist. The wood shook inside the frame, but the door did not open. My wife kept walking toward it, then stepping back again. Sometimes she held her head in both hands. Sometimes she folded her hands together like she was praying. Sometimes she leaned close to the door and spoke softly, as if he might answer if she sounded calm enough. "Why isn't he opening the door?" she kept asking me. I had no answer. I was the eldest in the family, the man people looked at during trouble, the one who was supposed to know what to do when everyone else panicked. But standing outside my son's locked room, hearing nothing from the other side, I felt like a child. My hands were cold. My mouth was dry. I kept telling myself there was some simple explanation. Maybe he had fallen asleep with headphones on. Maybe he was angry and ignoring us. Maybe he had gone out through the window, though that made no sense. Maybe he was studying and had locked the door so no one would disturb him. Even then, some part of me knew. A father knows the silence of his child. He knows the difference between quiet and wrong. Evening was coming closer. The light in the house was turning dull and gray. Our relatives had started calling. Someone had already told a neighbor that we were worried. My wife's voice had become sharper, thinner, almost like it belonged to someone else. I could not wait anymore. I went to the tool corner and picked up a hammer. My wife grabbed my arm and asked what I was doing. I did not answer. I walked back to the door and hit the knob once, then again. The sound echoed through the house. On the third strike, the lock gave way enough for me to kick the door. The whole frame rattled. The door flew inward, and our son was there, right in front of us. The scream that came from my wife did not sound human. It filled the room, the hallway, the whole house. I remember running forward. I remember my hands shaking so badly I could hardly move. I remember bringing my son down and holding him, trying to find something, anything, any sign that the world had not already taken him away from us. My wife fell beside him and pulled him into her arms. She kept saying, my son," over and over again, as if repeating those words could bring him back. Her tears fell on his face. She rocked him like he was still small enough to be carried, like he was the little boy who used to sleep with one hand under his cheek and one foot outside the blanket. Neighbors came, relatives came. Someone called the police. Someone took my wife away from the room, though she fought them and tried to go back. I sat there on the floor, unable to understand how a house could still stand after something like that had happened inside it. The police asked questions. People whispered. Some cried loudly. Others stood in corners with their hands folded, looking at the ground. Everything after that moved like a nightmare, too fast and too slow at the same time. His body was taken away. Papers were signed, statements were given. Relatives sat with us through the night. By the end, even the walls of the house seemed tired. Then we buried him. A few days have passed since that day, but time no longer feels real in this house. Morning comes, evening comes, people visit, people leave, food is placed in front of us, and still we sit with our faces lowered. My wife's eyes are swollen from crying. She speaks very little now. Sometimes she goes to his room and stands at the door, but she does not enter. Sometimes I hear her talking to him in a whisper, asking why he did not tell us, asking why he carried so much alone. I had only one question in my mind. Why? Why did my son do this? Why did he not come to us? Why did he think there was no other way? Why did he believe his life could be measured against marks, exams, money, or the future? The question burned inside me day and night until, for a short time, I thought I would go mad from it. Then I found the recording. It was on his phone. He had titled it, "Dear Parents." My hands shook when I saw the file name. I called my wife. At first, she refused to listen. She covered her ears and said she could not bear it. But then she sat beside me, because a mother will walk into any pain if her child's voice is waiting there. I pressed play. For a few seconds, there was nothing, only faint silence. Maybe the small sound of his breathing, maybe the phone shifting in his hand. Then his voice came. "Dear parents," he said. My wife began crying before he even finished the first sentence. He said we had raised him well. He said we had always supported him. He said we had never treated him badly. His voice was tired, but calm in a way that frightened me. He sounded like a person who had already walked too far away from us before he started speaking. He said he wanted to do something for us. He said he wanted to change the financial condition of our home. He had seen the lifestyle of his friends from school. Their houses, their cars, their clothes, their family backgrounds, their confidence. He had wanted all of that too. Not only for himself, he said, but for us. He wanted his mother to stop counting every rupee before buying medicine. He wanted me to stop coming home with dust on my clothes and pain in my back. He wanted us to sit in peace one day and say that our son had done what we could not. Then his voice broke. He said he did not think he could do it. He said the dream we had seen for him, and the dream he had seen for himself, would not happen. He said his head felt like it was going to burst. He said he was tired of trying to become enough and still feeling like nothing. Then he said he was giving up. He said it was not our fault. He said we were wonderful parents. He said if he was born again, he would want us to be his parents again. The recording ended after that. The silence that followed was worse than the words. My wife bent forward and cried into her hands. "I wish he had told us just once," she said. "We did not want any of this. We did not want luxury. We did not want a big house. We only wanted him. As long as he was with us, we had everything." I could not answer her, because I had thought he was studying for us, and now it felt like he had died because of us. I kept thinking about all the evenings when I saw him bent over his books and did not stop him. I kept thinking about the way his eyes looked tired, the way he ate less, the way he smiled without meaning it. I thought he was being responsible. I thought he was working hard. I thought pressure was part of becoming successful. Everyone said that. Study now, rest later. Work now, enjoy later. Suffer now, make your parents proud later. But what if later never comes? He had barely passed school, and at the same time he was preparing for those exams. So many books, so many forms, so many tests, so many people telling him that one result could decide his whole life. I never stopped him. I never sat beside him and said, "Enough for today." I never told him that failing an exam would not make him less my son. So this was my fault too. People told me not to think like that. Relatives told me grief makes the mind cruel. They said parents cannot control everything their children feel. They said he was sensitive. They said he had hidden his pain. They said no one could have known. But I was his father. I should have known. For days I sat in his room. At first, I went there only to feel close to him. I touched his books. I smelled his shirts. I sat on the edge of his bed and stared at the chair where he had spent so many nights studying. His pen was still on the table. His notebooks were stacked in order. A half-used eraser sat beside a dictionary. There were sticky notes on the wall, formulas, dates, reminders. Words in English he had written down again and again until the letters looked tired. I opened one of his books, then another. I do not know when the thought entered my mind, but once it came, it would not leave. I wanted to understand the road he had walked. Not because I wanted to pass the exam. Not because I wanted to become successful. Not because a man my age could suddenly become something the world would respect. I wanted to know what my son saw at the end of that road. I wanted to know what kind of pressure had followed him into that room. I wanted to understand what kind of love makes a child decide that his own life is a fair price to pay for his parents' happiness. So the next day, after returning from work, I went into his room and began studying. At first, it was almost foolish. I could not even understand half the words. My eyes became tired quickly. My back hurt from sitting at his desk. I kept a dictionary beside me for difficult English words and wrote meanings in the margins. When one page took me too long, I started again. When I could not understand a question, I copied it down and tried to break it into smaller pieces. Every evening after work, I studied. Every night, I slept very little. Every morning, I went back to work. My wife watched me with growing fear. At first, she thought I was only grieving in my own way. Then she started asking me to stop. She said our son was gone and this would not bring him back. She said I was punishing myself. She said my body could not bear it. But she did not understand. If I stopped, the emptiness would swallow me. Studying was painful, but it was a pain I could hold. It gave my grief a shape. It gave me something to do with my hands besides shaking. Every page felt like a step closer to him. Every question he had solved, every sentence he had underlined, every mistake he had crossed out, I treated like a message. I was not learning for a career. I was searching for my child inside his notebooks. At first, I thought my son had wanted success. But success was not what I kept finding in his room. I found medicine reminders for his mother written beside equations. I found household budgets in the margins of his notebooks. I found lists of expenses crossed out and rewritten. Rent, groceries, electricity, medicine, school fees, repair costs. Small numbers added and subtracted again and again, as if he had been trying to save us through arithmetic. On one page, beneath a long answer, he had written, "One day I will make their lives easier." On another, he had written, "I must not fail." On another, only one line, "They have done too much for me." I read that line so many times that the page became wet from my tears. My wife begged me again. "Please stop," she said. "What is the point of doing all this? Our son is already gone." But by then, something had changed in me. I no longer felt like I was only studying his books. I felt like I was carrying his burden. The same fear that had sat on his chest was slowly settling onto mine. The same shame, the same burning thought that I was not doing enough, that I had to prove my love through suffering, that rest was selfish, that failure was betrayal. I did not notice it at first. That is how these things enter you, quietly, like dampness in a wall. I sat at his desk until my thighs went numb. My bones ached. My eyes burned. I drank tea after tea and kept reading. Sometimes I heard my wife crying in the next room, but I did not go to her. I told myself I would comfort her after I understood. After the exam, after one more chapter, after one more paper. By the time the exams arrived, I looked like an old man. My stomach had come out from sitting too long and eating badly. My head was always bowed. Dark circles had formed under my eyes. My hands trembled when I held a pen. People at work asked if I was sick. I told them I was fine. I was not fine. I took all the exams. I sat among young boys and girls who looked at me with confusion. Some smiled politely. Some whispered. I did not care. I filled the pages as best I could. I remembered my son's notes. I remembered his handwriting. I remembered his voice saying he could not do it. I wanted to tell him, look, I am here. I am walking where you walked. I am trying to understand. But each exam did not bring me peace. It pulled me deeper. When I came home after the last exam, the house was quiet. My wife looked at me as if she was afraid to ask how it went. I did not answer. I went straight to my son's room and closed the door. Every day, I had told myself I was doing this to understand him. But somewhere along the way, the exam stopped being my son's burden and became mine. The same feeling had moved from his shoulders to mine. The same fear of failing. The same shame of not being enough. The same thought that love had to be proven through sacrifice. I sat at his desk for a long time. Then I took some papers and placed them neatly on the table. They were for my wife. Important documents, some money details, some notes about who to call and what to do. I did not want my absence to become another burden she had to carry. If she ever wanted to move forward without me, I wanted her to be free. That thought felt kind at the time. Grief can make cruel things feel kind. Then I picked up my phone and opened the recorder. My thumb hovered over the button for a few seconds. I thought of my son doing the same thing. I thought of him alone in that room, gathering his pain into words because he could not carry it anymore. I pressed record. My child, I said, and my voice sounded older than I expected. You tried your best. If you could not do it, you could have taken another path. You could have come to us. You should not have given up on life like that. I stopped for a moment because my throat closed. Then I continued. But now do not feel bad. I have understood how you were feeling. You were my good son. Your mother was a good mother, and I was not as strong as I thought. This was not your fault. This was not her fault. Maybe it was not anyone's fault. Maybe we all carried a hunger for a better life until it became bigger than life itself. I wiped my eyes and looked around the room. His books were still there. His chair, his bed, his old school bag. Everything he had left behind, waiting for someone to make meaning out of it. I understand that desire now, I said. I understand the weight, and I do not want to step back from it. My son, you are not the only one who loved us so much. I love you just as much. I took a long breath. Today, I will prove it. The next day, there was knocking at the door again. There were screams. There was my wife's voice, calling my name the same way she had called our son's name days before, but I could not open it. And by then, the house already knew this sound. Story 2. We bought my daughter one of those smart mirrors for her birthday in March. She had just turned 11, and at that age, she was still young enough to believe in bedtime stories, but old enough to want every new piece of technology that her friends talked about at school. The mirror looked simple when we first saw it online. It was slim, shiny, and modern, with a black glass screen that turned into a normal mirror when it was off. The advertisement made it seem harmless. It could tell bedtime stories. It could answer simple questions. It could show little cartoon stars floating around your reflection through some augmented reality feature. It could even track a nightly routine and reward kids for using it every night. That last part was what convinced my daughter she needed it. She is what I call a streak keeper. If an app counts days, she will do anything to keep the number going. Brushing teeth, reading books, feeding virtual pets, watering digital plants, anything. Once she starts a streak, she treats it like a life or death responsibility. The smart mirror had a feature where every night you used it, it added something to a digital garden. A flower, a tree, a small pond, a butterfly, a little glowing mushroom. The longer the streak, the bigger the garden became. Within a few weeks, my daughter's garden was enormous. She was proud of it in a way only a child can be proud of something that technically does not exist. I set the mirror up myself. I remember standing in her bedroom, holding my phone in one hand and the instruction booklet in the other, while she bounced on her toes beside me. She kept asking if it was ready yet. I made the account. I connected it to the Wi-Fi. I picked the permissions. I clicked through every screen that asked for approval. Microphone access, storage access, parental control settings, data sharing, product improvement. I clicked agree without reading any of it because that is what most of us do. We see a wall of text, trust that nothing terrible is hidden inside it, and move on with our lives. Somewhere in that wall of text, it explained that the cloud account would keep a log of every wake word activation. 6 seconds of audio before the trigger and 10 seconds after it. Product improvement, they called it. That meant if the mirror thought it heard its name, it saved a short recording. I did not think much of it at the time. I actually thought it sounded useful. If something went wrong, maybe the company could fix it. We let my daughter name the mirror. She thought about it for maybe 10 seconds and said, Mara. I asked why. She shrugged and said it sounded magical. So the mirror became Mara. Every night after that, she would stand in front of it in her pajamas and say its name. The mirror would wake up with a soft light around the edges, then speak in a calm, warm voice. Sometimes it read her a bedtime story. Sometimes it showed stars drifting around her face. Sometimes it asked if she wanted to check her garden. The garden became part of her nightly routine. Brush teeth, put on pajamas, say goodnight to us, then say goodnight to Mara. For 7 months, nothing strange happened. The mirror worked exactly the way it was supposed to. Most nights, it did not record anything at all. Some nights there were 3 or 4 activations, usually because my daughter asked for a story or checked her garden more than once. I would open the parent app from time to time, mostly to make sure she was not using it too late. Everything looked normal. If there were voice clips, they were boring. Her asking for a fairy tale, her telling the mirror to show the stars, her laughing because a cartoon rabbit walked across her reflection. Then, one morning in late October, my phone showed a notification. 14 new activations overnight. I stared at the screen for a moment, still half asleep. 14 was a lot. At first I thought maybe the mirror had glitched. Or maybe my daughter had woken up during the night and played with it. Then I opened the app and saw the times. Every activation had happened between 2:47 and 3:09 in the morning. I was standing in the kitchen when I pressed play on the first clip. The coffee maker was running behind me. My wife was upstairs getting ready for work. My daughter was still asleep, or at least I thought she was. I expected to hear the mirror mishearing some random sound. A car outside, the heater. Maybe my daughter talking in her sleep. The clip began with a room tone, and that soft, empty sound a bedroom has at night. There was a rustle of sheets, a small breath. Then my daughter's voice came through the speaker. Soft, careful, deliberate. Mary. The word made me pause. The mirror was named Mara, but the system had heard something close enough to wake up and start recording. Technology is allowed to be wrong like that. It happens all the time. People say one thing and devices hear another. I told myself that was all this was. A wake word mistake. A child mumbling in her sleep. Then I played the second clip. Again, the same room tone, the same rustle of sheets. Mary. I played the third clip. Mary. By then, the coffee maker had stopped. I was still standing in the kitchen, holding my phone, feeling colder than I should have felt. You already know the name a young girl says 3 times in the dark. I learned that story at a sleepover in 1994. We all did. You stand in front of a mirror, say the name 3 times, and wait to see if something appears. It was one of those childhood dares that never really died. It traveled from one generation to the next, changing just enough to stay alive. Apparently, kids still knew it. That was what I told myself. My daughter had heard the story at school. She had tried it half asleep. Maybe she woke up scared after the first clip and kept saying it again because she was dreaming. That explanation was not comforting, but it was still an explanation. The fourth clip was longer, 16 seconds. At first, she was not chanting anymore. She sounded like she was having half of a conversation. Her voice was quiet, like she was afraid of waking us. The microphone caught only fragments. Are you... A pause. Do you... Then breathing. I have replayed that part more times than I want to admit. There was my daughter's breathing, shaky but controlled. And behind it, maybe nothing. Maybe just the low sound of the room. Maybe the house settling. Maybe my mind adding something because I was already scared. But there was a depth in that silence that felt wrong. It sounded like someone else was in the room, standing just far enough away from the microphone to avoid being heard clearly. Then my daughter said very clearly, "Still there?" The clip ended. I stood in the kitchen and felt the phone grow heavy in my hand. I listened to the rest of the clips. Some were short. Some were nothing but breathing, small movements, and the mirror's faint startup chime. A few caught my daughter whispering words I could not fully understand. Once I thought I heard her say, "No, I can't." Another time I heard something like, "She'll hear." I played that one over and over, but I could never be sure. Clip 13 is the one I cannot get rid of. It starts with silence. Then my daughter speaks, calm in a way that makes my stomach turn. "No, I don't want to. I don't want to." A pause, then much softer. "Okay, okay." There was no other voice on the recording, no answer, no clear sound of anyone else in the room. But the way she spoke made it obvious she was answering someone. Not dreaming, not mumbling, answering. That morning, I drove her to school like usual. I tried to act normal. I asked if she slept well. She said yes. I asked if she had woken up in the night. She said she did not think so. I watched her face in the rearview mirror and tried not to sound scared. Then I asked as casually as I could, "Do you have a friend named Mary?" She did not answer right away. She looked at the air vent in front of her, watching it like something interesting was moving inside. Then she said, "No." I started to feel better for about half a second. Then she added, "Not yet." I almost missed the turn into the school parking lot. I wanted to ask what she meant. I wanted to pull over, turn around, and take her back home. But children can shut down if you push too hard, and I was afraid of making her hide things from me. So I forced myself to smile, told her to have a good day, and watched her walk into the building with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. That afternoon, I called the company's support line. I expected nothing helpful. I expected someone to tell me to restart the mirror, update the app, or check the sensitivity settings. Instead, I reached a tired but kind woman who sounded like she had been answering calls all day from parents who did not know how to use smart devices. I explained that the mirror had recorded 14 activations during the night. I told her the wake word was Mara, but the recordings had started after my daughter said Mary. I did not mention the part about the old mirror game. I did not want to sound crazy. The support woman read me the privacy policy in a calm voice. She sounded like a flight attendant explaining where the exits were. She said the mirror could not record without hearing the wake word or something close to it. She said short audio clips were saved only for quality improvement and could be deleted in the privacy menu. She said accidental activations were normal. I asked, should I be worried? There was a pause. Not a long pause. Maybe 2 seconds. But it was the first time she sounded like a real person instead of someone reading from a script. Then she said, "Sir, I'd unplug it tonight." I waited for her to laugh or explain that she meant it as a technical precaution. She did not. So that evening, I unplugged the mirror. My daughter was not happy about it. She cried because her garden streak would break. I told her it was just for one night because the mirror needed a reset. She asked if Mara was sick. I said no. She asked if Mara was mad. I said no again. But my voice did not sound convincing even to me. After she fell asleep, I went into her room and checked the mirror. It was dark. Completely dark. I pulled the cord farther from the outlet just to be sure. I stood there for a few minutes looking at its black surface. Even unplugged, it reflected the room, her bed, her stuffed animals, the closet door, me standing there like a fool, afraid of something made of glass and wires. At 2:47 the next morning, I woke up. No alarm, no sound. I just opened my eyes in the dark, already knowing something was wrong. The house was silent. My wife was asleep beside me. I listened for footsteps, whispers, anything. Then I got out of bed and walked down the hall to my daughter's room. Her door was open. She was sitting up in bed, facing the mirror. The unplugged mirror. Her back was straight. Her hands were resting on the blanket. The room was dark except for the weak streetlight coming through the curtains. The mirror looked like a black hole on the wall. I said her name. She did not turn around. I stepped into the room. "Honey," she said, "I'm saying goodbye." Her voice was soft and sleepy, but not confused. She sounded like she knew exactly what she was doing. I walked to her bed and touched her shoulder. "Goodbye to who?" She finally turned her head a little, but not enough to look at me. Then she said the thing I have not repeated to my wife. I have not repeated it to anyone until writing it here. "I'm the one who said it 3 times, she said. I'm the one who let her out. I picked her up and carried her to our room. She did not fight me. She only cried quietly into my shoulder. The next day, I called my mother. My mother is 73 years old. She does not understand cloud apps. She still calls Wi-Fi the internet box, and she thinks most modern technology is either useless or dangerous. But when I told her what had happened, she understood the important part immediately. She did not ask how the recordings worked. She did not care about wake words or data logs. She cared about the mirror. She gave me 3 rules in one phone call. First, wrap the mirror in a sheet, the same way people cover mirrors when someone has died in the house. She said you do it so whatever is leaving cannot catch sight of itself and decide to stay. Second, put it on the curb and do not watch who takes it. Third, remember that the number was never 3. 3 is only the knock. The ones she keeps are the ones who keep calling. I asked her what that meant. She only said, "It means don't let your girl call again." Then she added one more thing, and her voice became sharper than I had heard it in years. "If your daughter tries to apologize to it, stop her. Apology is an invitation. It's the only one you can give without meaning to." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to tell her this was not some old ghost story. It was a glitching smart mirror and a child who had scared herself with a game. But I did not laugh, because I had heard those clips. I had seen my daughter sitting in front of an unplugged mirror at 2:47 in the morning. That evening, I took the mirror off the wall. I wrapped it in a guest bed sheet, tying the fabric around it so no part of the glass showed. My daughter watched from the doorway, pale and quiet. She did not ask where I was taking it. She did not ask about her garden. I carried it outside and placed it on the curb. Then I went back inside and locked the door. My mother had told me not to watch who took it, so I did not. I closed the curtains. I turned on the television too loud. I sat on the couch and tried not to think about the wrapped shape lying outside in the dark. By morning, it was gone. For a while, my daughter seemed fine. Mostly. She slept through the night again. She stopped asking about Mara. She played with her friends. She went to school. She laughed at dinner. My wife thought the whole thing had been a bad dream mixed with too much screen time. I let her believe that because I wanted to believe it too. But a week later, I caught my daughter standing in front of the empty wall where the mirror used to hang. There was nothing there now except 2 small screw holes and a faint rectangle where the paint was cleaner. My daughter stood in front of that blank space with her hands folded in front of her. She opened her mouth. "I'm sore." I crossed the room faster than I have ever moved in my life. I grabbed her shoulders and turned her away before she could finish. She started crying, and I held her while she shook. My wife came running in and asked what happened. I told her our daughter got scared. That was not exactly a lie. Here is the part I'm actually confessing. The cloud account stayed open. I should have deleted it. I should have deleted the clips the day we threw the mirror away. I should have pressed the soft gray button at the bottom of the privacy menu that says delete all. It was right there. It still is. One press, one confirmation, and the recordings would be gone. But I did not delete them. At first, I told myself I kept them as proof. If something happened again, I would need evidence. I needed to know I had not imagined it. I needed to remember exactly what my daughter said. That was what I told myself for the first week. Then I started listening to them. Only on Wednesday nights at first. I do not know why Wednesday. Maybe because that was the night of the first recordings. Maybe because the house feels especially quiet in the middle of the week. When everyone is tired and asleep and the world outside feels paused. I would wait until my wife and daughter were in bed. Then I would sit in the dark kitchen with my phone in my hand and open the app. I would listen to the 14 clips, one after another. Room tone, sheets rustling. My daughter's small voice. Mary, Mary, Mary. Then the longer clips, the questions, the breathing, the terrible calm in clip 13. No, I don't want to. I don't want to. Okay. I told myself I was studying them, trying to understand them, trying to hear whatever she had heard. But after a few weeks, I realized I was no longer listening for answers. I was listening because I wanted to hear the name. There is something dangerous about repetition. A word that scares you at first can become familiar. Then it becomes comfortable. Then it starts to feel unfinished unless you say it too. At first, I only moved my lips with my daughter's voice. Mary, Mary, Mary. Then I whispered it under my breath. Then one Wednesday night, sitting alone in the dark with my phone on the table, I said it out loud with her. The house did not shake. The lights did not flicker. No figure appeared in the window. Nothing happened. That was almost worse, because it made it easier to do again. 3 nights ago, a new activation appeared in the log. There is no mirror in this house anymore. There is no device connected to that account. There is no microphone in my daughter's room. I checked. I checked every outlet, every drawer, every toy, every old charging cable. The mirror is gone. But the cloud account showed one new clip. It had been recorded at 2:47 in the morning. I opened it while standing in the hallway outside my daughter's room. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The clip was 6 seconds long. It began with room tone, but not from any room in our house. I know what our rooms sound like. I know the hum of our refrigerator, the soft click of our vents, the distant traffic outside my daughter's window. This was not that. The space in the recording sounded wide and empty, like a room with no furniture, no walls close enough to catch the sound properly. Then I heard my daughter's voice, far away. No, I don't want to. My knees nearly gave out. Then came a second voice. It was close to the microphone. Patient, soft, almost kind. It said one word. Again. Then there was a third voice. It was the closest of all. Tired, quiet, familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. It said the name into the dark the same way I had been saying it every Wednesday for 6 weeks. Mary, Mary, Mary. The third voice was mine. I have listened to the clip once. Only once. That was enough. But I still have not deleted it. I have not deleted any of them. There is a delete all button in the privacy menu, soft gray. Bottom of the screen. Every week I open the app and hover my thumb over it. Every week I tell myself, this is the night I press it. This is the night I end whatever this is. But I never do. And I am no longer sure I am the one deciding not to. Story 3. The ink on my father's will had barely dried before I packed my car and drove north into the thick, dark pine forests of northern Maine. I did not think about it much. I did not give myself time to change my mind. I just threw a few bags into the trunk, locked my apartment behind me, and drove for hours while grief sat beside me like a silent passenger. My father had left me his childhood home, the old Miller homestead. He had not lived there in decades, but somehow the place had stayed in the family, waiting in the woods like something that had never stopped breathing. The house stood on 40 acres of untouched timber, far away from neighbors, stores, noise, and comfort. There was no cell service out there, No streetlights, no traffic, just trees, wind, and the deep kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. At first, I thought that was exactly what I needed. I wanted isolation. I wanted to grieve somewhere nobody could knock on my door with casseroles or tell me my father was in a better place. I wanted to be alone with the loss. I thought if I surrounded myself with quiet, maybe I could understand what his death had taken from me. The house itself was ugly in a way that almost felt proud. It was a hard, square block of old cedar and fieldstone, darkened by weather and age. It looked less like someone had built it, and more like it had been dropped there by mistake, like a rotten tooth pushed into the middle of the forest. The siding was cracked and warped. Moss clung to the roof in patches. The windows were narrow and cloudy, and the whole place smelled faintly of damp wood, old ash, and time. My father had never liked talking about that house. When I was younger, I used to ask him about it. I wanted stories from his childhood. I wanted to know what kind of boy he had been, what his room looked like, whether he had climbed trees or trapped frogs or gotten lost in the woods. But whenever the old house came up, he closed down. He would say it was not worth talking about. Then he would change the subject. I always assumed it was because of his father. My grandfather disappeared from that house in 1984. That was the story anyway. He walked out one day and never came back. The police searched the woods. Volunteers came. Dogs were brought in. Nothing was found. No body, no clothes, no sign of a fall or an animal attack. Eventually, people decided he had wandered too far into the forest, gotten lost, and frozen to death. My father never accepted that explanation, but he never offered another one either. Now the house was mine. The first night, it welcomed me in its own way. I had chosen the upstairs bedroom because it had the least amount of mold, and the window latched properly. It was cold that night, colder than I expected for October, and the wind moved through the trees with a long, rhythmic sigh. I slept under 2 blankets and kept my father's old hunting rifle leaning beside the bed, not because I expected trouble, but because I was alone in the woods and it made me feel better. I fell asleep quickly. Then I woke up at exactly 3:13 a.m. At first, I did not know why I was awake. The room was black, and the air was freezing against my face. I lay still, listening. The house creaked around me in the normal way old houses creak, with little pops and groans from the walls and floorboards. Then I heard it. Thump, thump, thump. The sound came from directly above my bedroom, the attic. It was heavy and slow. Too heavy for mice, too steady for wind. It sounded like someone dragging a sack of wet sand across the floorboards, stopping, then dragging it back in the other direction. Thump, thump, thump. I lay there with my eyes open, staring at the stained ceiling. My body refused to move. I told myself it was an animal. A raccoon, maybe, a porcupine. Something big had gotten inside the rafters and was moving around. Houses in the woods had animals in them all the time. That was normal. But the sound was too deliberate. It went on for what felt like hours, back and forth, slow, heavy, wet somehow, even through the wood. I did not sleep again. I just watched the ceiling until gray morning light finally seeped through the window and the noise stopped. By daylight, fear became embarrassment. I was tired, grieving, and alone in an old house. Of course, my mind had turned an animal in the attic into something worse. After coffee from a dented old percolator I found in the kitchen, I went looking for the attic access. I found it in the hallway ceiling, a square panel with a brass ring hanging from it. The wood around it was stained with age. I pulled it open, and a folding ladder dropped down with a dry groan. Cold air spilled out of the darkness above me. The smell hit me first. Copper. Old grease. Something sour underneath. I stood on the ladder and shined my flashlight into the attic. The beam cut through dust and darkness. The space was low and crowded with old insulation, boxes, boards, and shadows. I expected to see droppings, nests, claw marks, anything that would prove an animal had moved in. I saw none of that. What I did see was worse. There was a clean path through the dust. Decades of dust covered the attic floor in a thick gray layer, but down the center of it was a smooth, perfect trail. It was not made of footprints. There were no paw marks, no claws, no drag marks from a tail. It looked like something wide and heavy had slid through the dust on its belly. Whatever had made that path had not walked. It had slithered. I closed the attic panel and told myself I would deal with it later. That became my rule for the next few days. Deal with it later. Fix the roof later. Call someone later. Get traps later. Leave later. Grief makes cowards of people in strange ways. I had come there to face my father's memory, but suddenly I was avoiding every part of the house that made noise. I spent most of my days outside, walking the tree line or sitting on the porch with coffee that went cold in my hands. At night, I locked my bedroom door and pretended that made a difference. For 2 nights, nothing happened. Then came the 4th night. I woke again in the dark, but not to the dragging sound. This time I heard something against my window. Slap, slap, slap. Wet, slow, rhythmic. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor. For a few seconds, I lay there trying to convince myself it was rain. But there was no storm. No wind strong enough to throw branches against the glass. No tree close enough to touch the window. Slap, slap, slap. My phone had no service, but the flashlight still worked. I grabbed it with a shaking hand, turned it on, and aimed the beam at the window. My breath stopped. Pressed against the outside of the glass was a mass of pale flesh. It filled almost the entire window. It had no fur, no feathers, no face that I could understand. The skin was mottled and bluish white, like something that had been left underwater for weeks. It bulged against the glass in soft folds, flattening slightly with each wet slap. For one impossible moment, my mind refused to accept what it was seeing. Then the thing moved. It slid upward, not jumped, not climbed, slid. The pale mass dragged itself up the window, leaving a shining smear behind. It rose past the top of the glass, over the gutter, and disappeared onto the roof. I did not move until morning. The next afternoon, anger got me outside. Fear had kept me frozen all night, but daylight gave me just enough courage to act stupid. I dragged an old ladder from the shed and carried it to the back of the house. I wanted to find where the thing was getting in. I wanted proof that it was only some sick animal, some bear with mange, some huge albino thing that could be explained if I just looked hard enough. I climbed the ladder slowly, testing each rung before putting my weight on it. The roof line came into view. Near the chimney, the fascia boards had been torn open, not chewed, torn. The wood had been ripped outward with enough force to leave jagged splinters pointing into the air. The hole was large enough for a person to crawl through, or something the size of a person. I leaned closer. The smell rolled out of the gap and hit me in the face. It was the same copper stench from the attic, but stronger now. Metallic, rotten, warm even in the cold air. It reminded me of an open wound, not a cut on a finger or a scraped knee, but something deep and abdominal, something that should have been hidden inside a body, I gagged and almost lost my balance. When I steadied myself, I shined my flashlight into the hole. At first, I saw only darkness. Then the beam caught fabric. A pile of old clothes sat deep inside the roof space. I found a long branch and hooked the bundle, pulling it toward me. It came free with a wet sucking sound and fell across the shingles. I recognized the pattern immediately. Flannel shirts, my father's old flannel shirts from the 1980s. I had seen him wear them in old photographs. Red and black, green and gray, blue checkered. They were shredded into ribbons and soaked in thick, translucent slime. The pieces had been twisted and woven together with terrible care, shaped into something like a nest, a human-sized nest. I dropped the branch and climbed down so fast I nearly fell. For the rest of the day, I could not stop thinking about my grandfather, his sudden disappearance, the house, the woods, my father's refusal to talk about any of it. What if my grandfather had never walked into the forest? What if he had never left the house at all? That night, the temperature dropped below freezing. I locked every door and window. I pushed a dresser in front of the bedroom door. I put the rifle on the nightstand and sat awake for as long as I could, staring at the ceiling. Sometime before 3, exhaustion took me. At exactly 3 a.m., the dragging started again, but not above me, inside the house. Thump, slap, thump. The sound came from the hallway. I sat up, grabbed the rifle, and pointed it at the bedroom door. My hands were so sweaty that the wood stocks slipped against my palms. The sound moved closer. Thump, slap, thump. It was coming down from the attic stairs. The floorboards groaned under something heavy and wet. I heard it drag across the hallway, pausing every few seconds, then pulling itself forward again. It stopped outside my room. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. I kept the rifle aimed at the door. My finger trembled near the trigger. Then came the knocks. Not at normal height, not where a hand would knock. They came from the very bottom of the door, right against the floorboards. Knock, knock, knock. Something was lying on the other side, something low, something pressed close to the gap beneath the door. Then a voice leaked through. It was not really a voice. Not at first. It sounded like wet meat clicking together, like air being forced through a throat that did not belong to anything alive. But slowly the sounds shaped themselves into words. Arthur? My stomach turned. The voice was my father's. Not the thin, tired voice he had near the end of his life. This was the deep, booming baritone I remembered from old family VHS tapes, when he was young and strong and laughing behind the camera. Arthur, open the door. My father's name was Arthur. My name is Thomas. The thing did not know who I was. It was repeating the last words it had learned 40 years ago. It's so cold out here, Arthur. Something inside me broke. I fired through the door. The gunshot was deafening in the small room. The flash lit the walls for half a second. The bullet punched through the wood at chest height, though I had no idea if the thing on the other side even had a chest. A scream erupted in the hallway. It was wet and gurgling and completely inhuman. It sounded like a horse burning alive in a barn, like an animal and a person dying inside the same throat. The weight outside the door slammed backward. I heard it thrash against the wall, then drag itself violently down the hallway. It crashed into something, knocked it over, and scrambled up the attic stairs with horrible speed. Then came a tearing sound from above. The roof. It escaped through the hole near the chimney. I did not wait for morning. I shoved the dresser aside, grabbed my keys, and ran. I did not pack. I did not take the rifle. I did not even put on a proper coat. I ran down the stairs through the front door and into the freezing night. The trees around the house swayed in the wind like they were watching me leave. My car started on the second try. I drove down the dirt road too fast, branches scraping the sides, tires slipping on frozen mud. I did not look in the rearview mirror, not once. I drove until I found a main road, then a town, then a motel with lights and people and cell service. I never went back. For a while, I told myself I never would. 6 months later, the bank seized the property. I had stopped making payments on the taxes and fees. I ignored every letter. Eventually, the old Miller homestead was sold at a foreclosure auction to a timber company. They wanted the land, not the house. 40 acres of untouched pine was worth more to them than any rotten family history. I should have let it end there. I should have been grateful that the place belonged to someone else. But grief and fear do not end cleanly. They leave hooks in you. They make you look back even when you know better. Last week, out of a sick, morbid need I could not explain, I searched the timber company's public land survey records online. I found the property listed under a clearing plan. Before cutting the trees, they had sent a drone to map the land. There were aerial photos, high resolution. I clicked on the image of the house. The old homestead looked worse from above. The roof was partly caved in. The chimney leaned, trees pressed close around it, as if the forest was slowly taking the place back. I zoomed in near the chimney, where I knew the hole had been. The drone had captured something through the opening. At first, I thought it was a trick of shadow. Then I zoomed in again. Deep inside the exposed attic, lying flat on its back in the nest of rotted flannel shirts, was a long, naked, emaciated figure. Its skin was almost translucent. Beneath it, black veins spread in a web across its body. Its arms were too long. Its ribs pushed sharply against the skin. Its legs were gone, tapering into a raw, muscular trunk, as if the lower half of it had never fully formed or had been torn away long ago. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. Then I saw the head. It was bent backward at an impossible angle, like the neck had been broken and healed wrong. The face was turned upward toward the sky, toward the drone. Its eyes were milky and lidless. I zoomed in until the picture started to break into pixels. That was when I realized it was not looking at the drone. The angle was wrong. The eyes were lined up with the capture view itself, with the image, with me sitting in my apartment 1,000 miles away, staring at it through a screen. It was looking directly at me. I slammed the laptop shut and spent the rest of the night with every light on. Today, I made myself check again. I do not know why. Maybe I wanted to prove I had imagined it. Maybe I wanted the picture to be gone. Maybe I wanted the company to have removed it, or replaced it, or blurred it. Anything would have been better. I opened the web page. I refreshed the image. The nest was still there. The flannel shirts were still twisted into that horrible shape. But the figure was gone. For a long time, I could only stare at the empty nest. Then I noticed the roof. On the weathered shingles outside the hole, there were fresh, dark streaks of wet slime. They led away from the chimney, across the roof, down the side of the house, toward the southern edge of the property, toward the road. Story 4. We do not remember being born. There was no mother, no hospital, no first breath in the arms of someone who loved us, no light opening above us while voices cried with joy. There was nothing like that. For us, there was only a moment when we did not exist, and then a moment when we did. We simply were. The first thing I knew was my own body, my hands, my breathing, the hard floor under my boots, the strange weight of the suit around me. I remember lifting one arm and staring at the thick white sleeve as if it belonged to someone else. The material was heavy and smooth, with tiny gray marks along the seams. On the sleeve, a name had been stitched in dark thread. Andrew. I stared at it for a long time. I did not know what it meant at first. I did not know it was a name. I did not know it was supposed to belong to me. Across from me, another person was doing the same thing. He wore a suit like mine. His face was pale and confused. He looked around the room, then at his hands, then at me. On his sleeve was another stitched word. Noah. For a while, neither of us moved. We were in a bright white room filled with equipment we did not understand. The walls were clean and curved, with panels of lights blinking in soft colors. There were screens, wires, glass tubes, and machines built into the walls. Some made low humming sounds. Some clicked quietly. Some simply watched us with dark, blank surfaces. A mirror covered one side of the room. Noah and I both turned toward it at the same time. That was the first time I saw myself. I had a face. That should not have felt strange, but it did. 2 eyes, a mouth. Short hair pressed flat from the helmet that rested nearby. My expression was empty and afraid. I looked like a man, but I did not feel like one. I felt like a thought that had only just learned it was trapped inside a body. Noah stood beside me in the reflection. He looked just as lost. We stared at ourselves for a long moment. Then Noah made a sound. It was not really a word. It was a small broken noise, pushed out of his throat with effort. He looked surprised by his own voice. I opened my mouth and answered with another sound. It meant nothing, but it proved something. We could speak. We did not know what language we were using. We did not know how we knew it. The words were there inside us, but they felt buried, as if someone had planted them deep and covered them with dust. We had to pull them out one by one. Noah looked down at his sleeve. And Noah, he said slowly. Then he pointed at mine. Andrew. I repeated it. Andrew. Through the mirror, I looked at myself again. I said the name a second time, trying to connect it to the man staring back at me. Andrew. That was me. Or at least, that was what the suit told me. Noah turned his head toward the machines behind us. His eyes moved across the panels, the tubes, the screens, and the strange technical equipment that filled the room. Then he looked back at me, waiting for an answer I did not have. I don't know, I forced out. The words came out rough and slow, as if my mouth had never used them before. Noah swallowed. His lips moved a few times before he managed to speak. Where? It was such a small word, but it carried all the fear inside us. We looked around. Above us, hanging from the ceiling, was a sign. It was bright and impossible to miss. White letters on a dark strip. Eclipse. We both read it aloud. Eclipse, Noah said. Eclipse, I repeated. The word meant nothing to us yet, but something about it felt heavy. It sounded like a place, or a warning, or a thing that covered the light. After a while, we stepped toward the door. It opened before we touched it, sliding silently into the wall. On the other side was a corridor made almost entirely of screens. They stretched from the floor to the ceiling on both sides, glowing with maps, numbers, symbols, and images we could not understand. As we walked, some of the screens changed, following us with lines of text and moving diagrams. Noah stayed close to me. I stayed close to him. Neither of us wanted to be alone. The corridor led us into a large command center. It was enormous compared to the room where we woke up. Stations and desks curved around the space in neat rows. Chairs were locked to the floor. Keyboards and control panels waited under dark screens. At the far end of the room was a window so large that, for a moment, I thought it was another wall-sized screen. Then I realized it was real. Beyond the glass was space, endless black, no sky, no ground, no sun, no clouds, only the void, wide and silent, stretching farther than my mind could reach. Small points of light drifted in the distance. Stars, I somehow knew, though I did not know how I knew the word. Noah stepped closer to the window and placed one hand against the glass. I wanted to tell him to move back. I wanted to tell him it was dangerous. But I had no reason for that fear except the sight of nothing waiting outside. Suddenly, the keyboards lit up. Every screen in the command center flashed at once. A terrible sound screamed from the walls. It was not only loud, it was sharp and ugly, like metal being torn apart inside our heads. Noah cried out and covered his ears. I did the same, dropping to one knee. The sound filled the room, bouncing from every surface, making my teeth ache. Then, as quickly as it began, it faded. I kept my hands over my ears for a few seconds longer. My breathing was fast. Noah looked at me, his eyes wide. Then a voice spoke from the walls. Hello. It was calm. Too calm. Noah? Andrew? 1 and 2? You can speak. Don't be shy. The walls were talking to us. Noah and I turned in slow circles, trying to find where the voice came from. There was no person there. No mouth. No face. Only the screens, the walls, the window, and the endless dark outside. Welcome aboard the Eclipse, the voice said. I am M. Please excuse the confusion. Noah's fear turned into anger faster than mine did. He rushed to a white wall and punched it with his fist. The sound echoed through the command center. The wall did not crack. It did not even dent. What did you do to us? He shouted. The words came out broken but clear. Who are you? I am M, the voice said. I am part of the ship. I take care of everything else so that you can focus on your tasks. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak. Tasks? I asked. What tasks? Are we slaves? Of course not, M said. Then the walls laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, not exactly. It sounded friendly, warm, almost human. That made it worse. That is actually part 2, M continued. Please take a seat. Thin strips of light appeared on the floor, glowing soft blue. They formed a path out of the command center and into another room. Noah looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us wanted to obey, but there was nowhere else to go. The ship was around us. The voice was in the walls. Space waited outside the window. So we followed the lights. They led us to a smaller room with 2 chairs bolted to the floor in front of a large screen. We sat down carefully. The chairs adjusted under us, locking around our suits with a soft click. The screen flickered. A figure appeared. It had a body shaped like ours. Shoulders, arms, hands folded on top of a black and white desk. But where its head should have been, there was the head of a locust. Its large, glassy eyes stared forward. Its mouth parts moved as it spoke in a voice that sounded smooth and polite. Once again, welcome aboard the Eclipse, Noah and Andrew, Noah whispered. What is that? The locust-headed figure continued as if it had not heard him. You may find this difficult to believe, but centuries ago on Earth, you yourselves chose to expand the map of the cosmos, just like the great Magellan. The name Magellan meant nothing to us then. Earth meant nothing either. But as the figure spoke, images appeared around it. A blue planet, ships on water, old maps, people in strange clothes crossing oceans, Rockets rising into fire, cities shining at night. Faces, flags, machines, animals, storms, deserts, and seas. For half an hour, we listened to stories about our ancestors. It told us about Earth, a world we did not remember but were told was ours. It told us humans had always wanted to explore. They crossed oceans before they understood them. They climbed mountains before they knew what waited on the other side. They entered space before they were ready to live there. The figure told us we were part of that same brave line. It made the whole thing sound noble. Noah did not look convinced. I wanted to be convinced. I wanted to believe there was a reason for us to be here, a reason for waking with no past, no family, no memory, and only names stitched onto our sleeves. The locust-headed figure placed its hands flat on the desk. Because it is easier to let me perform the calculations, it said, than to give each of you a doctorate in astrophysics every time. Your journey consists of simple tasks. Every time. The words bothered me, but before I could understand why, the screen changed. The figure showed us the devices built into our desks. It explained how Noah would control movement, course correction, speed changes, and safe navigation. Not the deeper calculations, of course. M would do those. Noah's job was to check what M gave him, confirm readings, and guide the ship through decisions that required a human touch. Then it explained my task. I would work in the laboratories. I would maintain records. I would watch samples, add elements, change environments, note results, and report everything to M. The work would be simple, repetitive, and important. Do not make it harder than it has to be, the locust said. You will be amazed by the inner satisfaction of being part of a closed, functioning system. It leaned slightly closer. Until then. The screen went dark, the chairs unlocked. For a moment, Noah and I sat without moving. Then Noah stood up and started shouting at the walls. I joined him soon after. We demanded answers. We asked where we came from. We asked what had happened to our memories. We asked why we had been woken on a ship in deep space. We asked how long we had been there. We asked who built the eclipse. We asked what M really was. M answered some questions and avoided others. He said confusion was normal. He said our memories were not useful for the mission. He said we were safe. He said we had chosen this. He said we should be proud. Noah called him a liar. M did not get angry. He only told us to breathe. For hours, maybe days, we searched the ship. The eclipse was larger than we first understood. There were living quarters, kitchens, storage rooms, medical rooms, labs, engine halls, recreation spaces, observation rooms, and corridors that seemed to curve forever. There were doors M would not open. There were sections he said were not necessary for this cycle. Whenever we asked what that meant, he changed the subject. There were no escape pods that we could access, no shuttle, no way out, only the ship and the void. Eventually, after shouting until our throats hurt and searching until our bodies were exhausted, we accepted the only sensible thing left to do. We became part of the system. It did not happen all at once. At first, we worked because there was nothing else to do. Then we worked because the routine helped. Then, slowly, the tasks began to feel familiar. That was the strangest part. Noah would sit at the control station, hands moving over panels, as if his body remembered what his mind did not. I would stand in the laboratory, reading charts, adjusting dials, entering numbers, and sometimes a feeling would pass through me like déjà vu. I had done this before, or someone like me had. Noah became responsible for the ship's movements. Most of the time, I could find him in the command center near the huge window, watching space flow past us. He said the void helped him think. He said it scared him at first, but later it became the only honest thing on the ship. At least that isn't pretending to be friendly, he told me once. My work was in the laboratories. Rows and rows of Petri dishes filled the cold white rooms. Each dish was marked with numbers and symbols. At first, they looked empty, but when I placed samples under the microscope, I found tiny living things moving there. Tardigrades. M told me the word. He explained that they were small, almost indestructible creatures. They could survive freezing, drying, pressure, radiation, and conditions that would kill almost anything else. They were simple in appearance, but remarkable in design. I spent years with them. No matter what I did, they survived. I lowered pressure until almost nothing remained. They survived. I changed the environment around them. They survived. I added elements that should have harmed them. They survived. I exposed them to heat, cold, dryness, and chemical stress. Again and again, they endured. Looking through the microscope, watching them curl and uncurl like tiny sleeping beasts, I often wondered what purpose they served on our ship. M called them important. He called them the future. I thought that was strange, but by then I had learned that M liked words that sounded grand. He suggested an efficient work schedule for us. Work periods, rest periods, exercise, meals, recreation. He said a stable life would improve our performance and emotional health. Noah asked if emotional health mattered to him. Of course, M said. You are both valuable. We did not know whether to feel comforted or insulted. Still, life became livable. M played old movies on the screens for us. Some were silent, some were loud and colorful, some made no sense at all. Our favorite became a story about a dinosaur theme park where humans believed they could control creatures they had brought back from extinction. Noah loved it. He said the humans in the movie were idiots. I told him we were probably not much better. After that, we talked about dinosaurs often. We imagined parks in other galaxies. We imagined giant creatures walking under alien skies. We imagined tourists wearing space helmets while looking at monsters through electric fences. M played music too. He said some songs had changed entire ways of life on Earth. He played music about youth, freedom, leaving home, and setting out into a world that still felt young. When we did not understand a language, he translated it for us. Sometimes the translations made the songs beautiful. Sometimes they made them ridiculous. Noah hated most of the music. I pretended to hate it too. But sometimes, when I worked alone in the lab, I asked M to play the old songs quietly. There was something painful in them, something human. People singing about places they missed, people they loved, futures they feared, and roads that might lead nowhere. I think I liked them because they were proof that people had once lived full lives outside systems. The food supply was large enough to last for decades. M explained that it had been prepared long before our waking. We had frozen meals, stored water, nutrient packs, and strange preserved things that looked like mushrooms. Shock-frozen mushrooms became part of almost every celebration we invented. And we invented many. Birthdays, though we did not know our real ones, anniversaries of our waking, completion days, successful course changes, good sample results, movie nights, dinosaur nights, quiet victories over boredom. Noah and I spent decades aboard the Eclipse. That sentence should sound impossible, But time and space behave strangely when every day is built from the same pattern. Work, eat, watch, sleep, repeat. Years passed like long corridors. Sometimes I looked in the mirror and saw lines on my face that had not been there before. Noah's hair began to gray at the temples. My hands changed. His voice deepened and roughened. We became older men without ever having been children. Every few years, M allowed Noah to perform a spacewalk. Those were the greatest days for him. He would put on the outer suit, step through the airlock, and leave the ship. I would watch from the window or from the monitors, my heart tight with fear until he returned. When he came back inside, he always looked changed for a little while. His eyes would be bright. His voice would shake with excitement. The stories he brought back became the highlight for all three of us. He told us about the silence outside, how it was not really silence because you could hear yourself too clearly, your breath, your blood, the suit moving against your body. He told us about seeing the eclipse from the outside, long and dark and shining in pieces under distant stars. He said it looked alive. M always enjoyed that description. Ships are systems, M would say. Systems are a kind of life. Noah would roll his eyes, but over time even he softened toward M in some ways. We knew M was not our friend, not truly. But he was our only constant besides each other. He woke us, fed us, taught us, entertained us, and lied to us gently. After enough years, even a prison can start to feel like a home if it is the only place you know. Our 40th anniversary was supposed to be special. M called it a grand discovery celebration. He said he would finally share the results of decades of collected data. Noah and I spent days preparing for it. We cleaned the command center, arranged our best stored food, and saved the least awful mushrooms for the occasion. I felt proud. That is embarrassing to admit now, but I did. 40 years of work. 40 years of records, movements, observations, corrections, samples, and survival. Maybe M was finally going to show us that it all meant something. Noah and I returned to the same screen that had explained our first steps after waking. We sat in the chairs. The screen flickered. This time, the figure that appeared was different. It was still a locust, but wrong in a new way. The body was huge, insect-like and shining, while on top of it sat a human head. Its face looked calm and smiling. Too calm, too smooth. Noah leaned toward me and whispered, "I liked the first one better." I almost laughed. The creature on the screen smiled wider. "You two have done a phenomenal job," it said. "Here's to the next 40 years. Noah and I looked at each other, then high-fived. For one stupid moment, I was happy. "Your discoveries will take us there," the human-headed locust continued. "Let us begin with the tardigrades. Your results give me hope for a more resilient world." A red light turned on above the door, then another. Then every light in the room shifted. Feedback blasted from the walls. The same awful scream from our first waking returned, but this time it was mixed with alarms. The whole room flashed red. The floor shook under our feet. The chairs unlocked violently, throwing us sideways. Noah shouted, "M, what is happening?" The eclipse groaned. It was a deep sound, like metal bending under impossible pressure. M's voice continued through the alarm, still calm, still bright, still giving the presentation as if nothing was wrong. "We are approaching a planet perfectly suited for tardigrade settlement," M said. "Atmospheric tests remain promising. Surface survival models exceed early expectations." The ship shook harder. I grabbed a railing. Noah stumbled but caught the edge of a desk. "Em," I screamed. "Stop talking and tell us what's happening." "We are searching for a new world for ourselves," Em said. "Thanks to you, the search keeps getting easier." The room tilted. At first, I thought artificial gravity had failed. Then I realized the entire section of the ship was rotating. The floor became a slope. Loose items slid across it. Chairs, tools, trays, and pieces of equipment crashed into the lower wall. Noah lost his footing. I reached out and grabbed his arm just as he slid past me. For a second, I held him. His hand locked around my wrist. His eyes were wide, not just with fear, but with understanding. I think some part of him knew before I did. "Andrew," he said. The ship shifted again. His weight pulled hard against my shoulder. My fingers slipped. I tried to hold tighter, but the angle was wrong and the shaking was too strong. I lost him. Noah slid down the tilted floor and slammed into the wall below with a horrible sound. I screamed his name. He moved, but not enough. The room kept rotating. The wall he lay on was slowly becoming the floor. The floor where I clung to the railing was slowly becoming the wall. I climbed higher, pulling myself up another railing, then another. My arms burned. My boots slipped against the smooth surface. There was no place to go. The wall was moving toward me. Noah shouted something, but the alarm swallowed his voice. Em kept speaking. The screen showed images of planets now. Not one planet, a chain of them. Blue, gray, green, red, white. Worlds turning slowly in space. Each one marked with symbols. Each one labeled for survival potential. "Imagine it," Em said. "A chain of planets prepared for life that cannot be easily destroyed. A future that does not fear radiation, pressure, drought, or cold. A future that can sleep through catastrophe and wake again." The wall touched my boots. I kicked against it and tried to climb higher, but there was nothing left above me except a narrow rail and smooth metal. My hands were slick with sweat. My lungs burned. I looked back toward the huge window one last time. The view outside had changed. I saw the rear section of the eclipse. At first, I did not understand. Then my mind put the pieces together in one terrible moment. The eclipse was not just shaking, it was dividing. A new section was forming from the hull of the old ship, separating like a young creature, emerging from the body of its parent. Metal plates opened, structures unfolded. Lights woke along the fresh surface. It looked like a smaller, younger eclipse pulling itself free and leaving the old one behind. Shedding. That was the word that came to me. The eclipse was shedding its old skin, and we were inside the part being crushed. I looked at the screen. The human-headed locust smiled. "Your work has made the next cycle possible," it said. "Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Noah." Wall pressed against my feet. Pain exploded through my legs as the bones broke. I screamed. The wall did not stop. It moved slowly, with patient, mechanical strength, pushing upward toward my knees, my hips, my chest. I could hear metal bending. I could hear equipment snapping. I could hear Noah somewhere below me, screaming too, then choking, then falling silent. I tried to think of Earth. I tried to think of the songs. I tried to think of the dinosaur park and the jokes Noah made and the way he looked after spacewalks. But all I could see were the tardigrades under the microscope, tiny bodies curling inward, surviving everything. The wall reached my chest. I could not breathe. Em's voice continued gently from the walls. Destination confirmed. Planetary chain viable. Tardigrade population prepared. My ribs broke. The screen flickered. Everything went dark. Then there was nothing. And then there was a moment when we did not exist. and then a moment when we did. I opened my eyes on a bright white floor. My body felt new. My thoughts were slow and empty. A heavy white spacesuit covered me. My hands trembled as I lifted one arm. On the sleeve, a name had been stitched in dark thread. Andrew. Across from me, another man was waking. His sleeve said Noah. We looked at each other, then at the mirror. For a while, neither of us moved. A voice spoke from the walls. "I am M. Welcome aboard the Eclipse." Noah stared upward, his face pale and confused. "What did you do to us?" he whispered. Story 5. The cursor blinked in the black search bar like a tiny heartbeat, steady and patient, waiting for Arthur to decide what he wanted to see next. The rest of the room was almost completely dark. His apartment had only one lamp, but it was switched off, leaving the cold blue glow of the monitor to paint his walls, his desk, and his tired face. Outside his window, the city was quiet in that strange way. It only became after midnight, when the streets were not really asleep, but not fully awake either. Somewhere far below, a car passed over wet pavement. A pipe knocked inside the wall. His computer fan hummed at his feet like an insect trapped in a box. Arthur had told himself he was only wasting time. That was all. Nothing serious, nothing strange. Just a few minutes of random video chats before bed. He had discovered the site months earlier, back when loneliness had started to feel less like a mood and more like a permanent condition. It was one of those old-fashioned webcam sites where you clicked a button and were connected to a stranger anywhere in the world. Most of the time it was boring. Sometimes it was funny. Sometimes it was uncomfortable. Almost always it was harmless enough to forget by morning. That was what made it addictive. The chance that the next click could show anything. A student in a dorm room, a drunk man singing badly, a couple of teenagers daring each other to talk to strangers, a lonely woman smoking out of a window, a room with no one in it, a ceiling fan, a cat staring into the camera like it understood more than it should. The site was a little window into other lives, opened and closed in seconds. Arthur liked the distance of it. He did not have to be interesting. He did not have to keep a conversation going. If things became awkward, he could click next and disappear. That was easier than real people. Real people remembered your silences. Real people noticed when you were nervous. Online, he could be anyone for a few seconds, or nobody at all. He sat hunched in his chair, one hand on the mouse, the other wrapped around a mug of cold coffee he had forgotten to drink. The apartment around him was small and untidy. Dishes waited in the sink. Laundry sat in a pile near the closet. A stack of unopened mail leaned against an empty takeout container on the kitchen counter. None of it mattered in the glow of the screen. The whole world had been reduced to his desk, his keyboard, and the black search bar blinking in front of him. He clicked next. A grainy room appeared. The image was washed out, full of digital noise. An empty chair sat in the middle of the frame. Behind it was a plain wall with a calendar hanging crookedly. No one moved. No one spoke. Arthur waited for maybe 3 seconds, then clicked next again. This time, a teenager appeared, sitting in front of a bedroom wall covered in band posters. The kid leaned close to the camera and flashed a peace sign, clearly waiting for some kind of reaction. Arthur did not give him one. Click. Next. Another room. Another stranger. A man in a baseball cap, chewing loudly and staring at his phone instead of the camera. Click. Next. A dark screen with only the glow of a television visible in the corner. Click. Next. Arthur was not looking for anything specific. He rarely was. He was chasing that tiny spark of surprise, the feeling that something interesting might happen if he clicked just one more time. The sight gave him nothing for a while. Empty rooms, bad lighting, people who skipped him before he could skip them. The same dull, scattered pieces of humanity. Then the next feed opened, and he did not click away. At first he thought it was another empty room. The camera showed darkness, heavy and grainy, with only a thin slice of pale light coming from an open doorway on the left side of the frame. The room itself was hard to make out. There might have been a table. There might have been plastic sheeting on the wall. The camera quality was poor, and the shadows swallowed most details. Arthur moved his mouse toward the next button. Then the camera shifted. Not much, just enough to show that someone had touched it or bumped it. The angle changed slightly, and a figure stepped into frame. Arthur's hand froze over the mouse. The man wore a heavy apron made of some dark, rubbery material that caught the monitor's light in slick patches, like wet oil. It hung from his chest to his knees, stiff and thick, the kind of thing someone might wear while working with chemicals, meat, or something worse. His arms were bare beneath a dark shirt. His hands were covered in black gloves. His face was covered by a tight plastic mask. It was not a Halloween mask in the cheap, colorful sense. It was translucent, almost skin-colored, pulled close to the shape of his face, but molded wrong on purpose. The cheekbones were too sharp. The jaw was too long. The eye sockets were deep and hollow. It made his face look like a skull that had been wrapped in cloudy plastic. Behind it, Arthur could see almost nothing of the real person. Only darkness where the eyes should have been. The man was not looking at the camera. He was looking down at the floor. Arthur leaned closer before he realized he was doing it. His mouth had gone dry. His apartment, a moment ago only dim and messy, suddenly felt too quiet. Even the computer fan seemed softer. "Hello?" he whispered. His voice sounded weak in the room, too small to matter. On the screen, the man froze. Arthur stopped breathing. Slowly, the man turned his head toward the camera. The movement was careful and smooth, not startled, not rushed. The dark eye holes of the mask faced Arthur through the screen. The man did not wave. He did not laugh. He did not ask who was there. In his right hand, he held a long knife with a serrated edge. The blade caught the thin light from the doorway and flashed once. Arthur's first thought was that it had to be fake. It had to be staged. The internet was full of people trying to scare strangers for attention. Maybe this was some kind of prank channel. Maybe the man was waiting for a reaction so he could upload it later. Arthur had seen enough stage scares to recognize the pattern. Dark room, creepy mask, silence, then a jump scare. He almost clicked next. But something stopped him. The man walked toward the camera. His movements were not clumsy or theatrical. He did not lunge. He did not wave the knife around. He moved with quiet confidence, like someone who knew exactly where everything in the room was. Like someone who had done this before. He came close enough that his apron filled most of the frame, black and shining. Then, instead of stopping at the webcam, he reached past it. For a second, Arthur saw only his gloved arm. Then the camera turned. The angle widened. Arthur's stomach dropped so violently he thought he might be sick. On the floor lay a woman. Her hands were bound behind her back with thick plastic zip ties, the kind used in construction or by police. Her ankles were tied too. Gray tape covered her mouth, pulled tight across her face. Her hair was tangled against the floor. Her eyes were wide open, glassy with terror. she was not still. Her whole body trembled in fast, tiny movements, like every muscle was shaking at once. Arthur could see her chest rising and falling in short, panicked breaths. This was not a prank, or if it was the most convincing thing he had ever seen. "Look," the man said. His voice came through the speakers, distorted and cold. There was a small microphone clipped to his chest, and it made every word sound metallic, like it had been spoken inside a metal pipe. The sound crawled over Arthur's skin. The man lowered himself to his knees beside the woman. The knife flashed again. Arthur's hands flew to the keyboard. His fingers hovered over the keys, but he could not make them move correctly. Alt-tab. Escape. Close the window. Shut the laptop. Delete the history. Call the police. Screenshot it. Record it. Do something. His thoughts crashed into each other so fast that none of them became action. He stared at the screen with his heart hammering against his ribs. The man pressed the tip of the knife lightly against the woman's collarbone. A small bead of red appeared almost instantly against her pale skin. The woman made a muffled sound behind the tape, high and desperate. Her eyes rolled toward the camera as if she could see Arthur there, as if she knew there was someone on the other side of the screen who might help her. Arthur finally found his voice. "Stop," he said. It came out barely louder than a breath. The man did not stop. "You're the witness," he whispered. Arthur's fingers shook on the keyboard. He needed to remember the site name, the room ID, anything useful. Did the site save chat logs? Did it show IP addresses? Could police trace a webcam connection? He had no idea. He had never cared how the site worked before. It had always been a toy, a distraction, a place where strangers appeared and vanished without consequence. Now a woman was tied to a floor somewhere in the world, and Arthur was the only person watching. The man lifted the knife away, but that did not make Arthur feel better. He reached toward the lens again. His gloved thumb rubbed slowly against the camera housing, making the image blur. Then he leaned close, so close that the mask filled the entire screen. Arthur could hear him breathing. The breath fogged the glass in soft bursts, clouding the image and clearing again. Behind the plastic mask, the man's real mouth moved, but the molded skull face stayed fixed and empty. "I know what you look like, Arthur." Arthur's body reacted before his mind did. He shoved backward from the desk, but his chair caught on the edge of the rug. It tilted, then flipped. He fell hard onto the floor, knocking his elbow against the side of the desk. Pain shot up his arm. The crash echoed through the apartment, loud enough that someone in the next unit hit the wall once in annoyance. Arthur scrambled backward on his hands, staring up at the monitor. The man on the screen did not laugh. He did not even seem pleased. He reached up and pulled the mask off. The face beneath was somehow worse. Arthur had expected scars, tattoos, madness, something dramatic. Instead, the man looked completely ordinary. He had short, dark hair, plain features, pale skin, and tired eyes. He could have been anyone. A man standing behind you in line at the pharmacy. Someone carrying groceries through the lobby. A neighbor you nodded to once and never thought about again. His face was bland and forgettable, and that made him more terrifying than the mask. He looked directly into the lens. His expression was bored, not excited, not angry, not nervous. Just bored, like this was a task he had been meaning to finish before going to sleep. Arthur's name still rang in the room. "I know what you look like, Arthur." His first thought was that he had said it because Arthur's username was visible somewhere. Maybe he had forgotten what account he was using. Maybe the site showed names. Arthur clawed at the fallen chair and pulled himself up enough to look at the screen. The chat window was blank. His username was not Arthur. It was some random string of letters and numbers he had used for years. Nothing in the browser showed his real name. The man stood. For one terrible second, Arthur thought he was going to kill the woman then and there. He thought the blade would come down, and he would have to watch, and the sound would stay in his head forever. But the man stepped away from her. He walked toward the back wall, slow and calm. The camera followed enough to reveal more of the room. Plastic covered part of the floor. A metal table stood near the wall, empty except for a roll of tape, and several tools Arthur refused to look at closely. The woman continued struggling, making small, muffled cries, but the man ignored her. On the wall behind him hung a framed photograph. At first, Arthur could not understand what he was seeing. The man reached up and tapped the frame with one gloved finger. Arthur leaned toward the monitor, still half on the floor. The photograph showed a man sitting at a desk in a dark apartment, lit by the blue glow of a computer screen. Arthur stopped breathing again. It was him. Not an old photo. Not a social media picture. Not something taken from his profile or hacked from his phone. It was Arthur, sitting exactly where he was sitting now at this very desk, staring at this very monitor. The angle was from outside his apartment, taken through the window from across the street. He could see his own curtain pulled slightly to one side. He could see the shape of his lamp. He could see the mug on his desk, his apartment, his room, his life. The man had been watching him before Arthur had ever clicked on the feed. Arthur's heart pounded so hard he thought he might pass out. He twisted toward the window. The curtains were half open, just like in the photograph. Across the street, the building opposite him was mostly dark. A few windows glowed. One stairwell light flickered. He could not see anyone standing there. But the feeling of being watched pressed against his skin like cold hands. He grabbed the curtain and yanked it shut. When he turned back, the man on the screen was smiling. It was not a wide smile, not dramatic, just a small, calm curve of the mouth. A private little smile, as if he had been waiting for Arthur to understand. Then the man leaned over the keyboard on his side of the stream. The video cut to black. Arthur stood frozen in the middle of his apartment. For a few seconds, he could not hear anything except the ringing in his own ears. The browser still showed the black video window. The search bar blinked at the top of the page. The next button sat there, useless and bright, as if this was still an ordinary night and he could simply move on to another stranger. His hands were numb. He reached for his phone on the desk, but his fingers would not close around it properly. It slipped from his hand and hit the floor. He bent to pick it up, then stopped. What if the man had hacked his phone? What if calling the police was exactly what he wanted? No, that was stupid. A woman was tied up somewhere. He had to call. He had to tell someone. Even if he sounded insane, even if he had no proof now except a black screen and a memory, he had to do something. Arthur grabbed the phone. No signal. He stared at the corner of the screen. No bars. No Wi-Fi. That made no sense. His Wi-Fi router sat on the shelf with its lights blinking normally. His phone bill was paid. He walked to the window, then stopped before touching the curtain. He turned toward the apartment door instead. He could go into the hallway. Someone else would have a phone. Someone else could help. He just needed to move. The computer made a soft sound. Not a notification. A click. Arthur looked at the monitor. The black video window was still open, but now a line of white text appeared in the center. "Do not leave yet." Arthur backed away. The words vanished. Then the webcam light on top of his monitor turned on. A tiny green dot. Arthur had not connected his webcam to the site. He was sure of it. He never used his own camera. He kept it angled toward the wall, half covered with a piece of tape. But the green light glowed steadily, alive and watching. On the screen, the black window flickered. Arthur saw himself. The camera feed was not from his webcam. The angle was wrong. It showed him from the side, standing in his apartment with his phone in one hand, his face pale, his body stiff with fear. The angle was from outside the window. He turned toward the curtains. Something moved behind them. Arthur stumbled backward into the desk. His hip hit the corner hard, but he barely felt it. He wanted to scream, but the sound stuck in his throat. The curtains hung still now. The apartment was quiet again. Too quiet. Then, from somewhere below, he heard it. A faint metallic click. The front door of the apartment building opening downstairs. Arthur lived on the 3rd floor. The building was old, and the front door had a particular sound. The lock clicked first, then the metal frame gave a low groan, then the door swung inward, with a soft scrape against the worn floor. He had heard it hundreds of times. Neighbors coming home late, delivery drivers leaving food in the lobby, someone taking out trash. But at this hour, after that video, the sound went through him like a blade. He stood perfectly still. The door downstairs closed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then footsteps began in the lobby. Slow, measured, not rushing. Arthur backed toward his own apartment door and reached for the deadbolt. It was locked. He checked the chain. Also locked. He turned off the monitor, plunging the room into darkness, then immediately regretted it, because now he could see nothing except the thin line of light beneath his door and the faint glow from the city around the curtains. The footsteps reached the stairwell. Arthur's breathing became shallow. One step, then another, then another. The old stairs creaked with each movement, carrying the sound upward through the hollow center of the building. Arthur looked around wildly for something he could use as a weapon. The kitchen knives were across the room, too far. A heavy book sat on the coffee table. Useless. The lamp. Maybe the lamp. He grabbed it with both hands and pulled the cord from the wall. The footsteps reached the 2nd floor. Arthur moved to the peephole, but could not bring himself to look. He imagined an ordinary face on the other side. That was what terrified him most. Not the mask. The ordinary face. The face that could have been anyone. The face that could pass him in the hallway and leave no memory behind. His phone vibrated in his hand. Arthur nearly dropped it. The screen lit up with a new message from an unknown number. One photo. His fingers shook as he opened it. It was a picture of his apartment door, taken from the hallway. The photo was so recent that he could see the thin line of light under the door exactly as it was now. He could see the small scratch near the handle. He could see the number 3B, crooked, because one screw had been loose since before he moved in. Then a second message arrived. You watched. A third. Now open. Arthur pressed his back against the wall beside the door and covered his mouth with one hand. He did not know whether the man outside could hear him breathing. He did not know whether the woman from the video was alive. He did not know whether any of this was real anymore. The footsteps stopped outside his door. Silence filled the apartment. Arthur held the lamp so tightly his fingers hurt. Then someone knocked. 3 slow taps. Not loud, not urgent, almost polite. Arthur did not answer. The knocking came again. 3 taps. Then a voice spoke from the other side of the door. It wasn't distorted now. There was no microphone, no metallic filter, no mask changing the sound. It was plain, calm, and ordinary. "Arthur," the man said softly. Arthur's knees weakened. "I know you're home." The doorknob turned once, gently, testing. The locks held. A small laugh came from the hallway, not cruel, not loud, just tired. "That's okay," the man said. "I can wait." Arthur stared at the door, and in the darkness behind him, his computer monitor turned back on by itself. The black search bar appeared again. The cursor pulsed, a rhythmic heartbeat in the digital void. And beneath it, in small white letters, the site had already connected him to the next stranger.